Ladies and gentlemen, this is ScaryBad Reviews, and this is my intro.
Want a Sprite cranberry?
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it is January 4th. It is the beginning of a new year. We are a couple days deep. I know it's been a little while. I've been having fun over the holidays, been meeting with family, just kind of enjoying my time off from school. But in all this time off that I've had, I've definitely watched plenty of movies that I need to talk about, because there's a couple of them that really kind of sparked my interest. And so today's going to be a little bit different in the fact that I'm still going to be going over, some movie news that's happened while I've been gone. I have two full-scale reviews for you today. I have a full-scale review of Aquaman, which I saw in theaters last week, which was a slightly disappointing, really long journey. We'll get to it when we get to it, but there's a lot wrong with that movie, and it was kind of disappointing. But the other movie that I'll be fully reviewing is the Netflix original Birdbox, which was a lot better. A lot of people know what it is now because of everything that's been happening on social media, and I actually want to have a discussion with that movie after I review it because of the impact social media and that movie had on each other, and kind of how now, there has to be some element of social media marketing when it comes to movies and stuff like that. So I wanted to talk about that some. And my 5 for 5 at the end of this episode is going to be things that I'm excited for in 2019. There's a lot of things to choose from. I picked my favorite 5, and I have a ton of honorable mentions. But 2019 definitely has a really good lineup, especially when it comes to Hollywood and the movies that are coming out. And even when it comes to the small screen, even when it comes to TV, we have a couple shows coming back after a long hiatus. So I think there's a lot of things to look forward to. And with that in mind, let us dive right in.
Wow.
So, to start things off, we have got some movie news. Now, a lot of this news that I have today involves Netflix, because Netflix has been on an absolute roll, ending the year and then opening the year up. A lot of times, streaming services do use New Year's Eve and New Year's Day to add massive amounts of titles to their programs and take massive amounts off. I usually track a lot of what's added to streaming services using the website and the app Just Watch. Good job of posting everything that's added to, as well as everything that's dropped from streaming services every single day. So I've been using that for a little while, and looking at it, New Year's Eve, I believe Hulu added somewhere in the vicinity of 50 titles, and Netflix added somewhere to 75. New Year's Day, Hulu added 91 titles, while Netflix added 100. Now, mind you, they are catching up on certain shows that they've fallen behind in seasons. They do have original content added in there, but still, that's still a lot to add in one day. So they kind of dominated with what they chose and what they got the rights to add to their programming on that, in that time. So Netflix really started the roll off. They had The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which did very well, according to social media, people talking about it, and it's very well reviewed. I'm about just past halfway through it, and I am enjoying it a lot. There's definitely a lot of horror influence on a story that people kind of associate with positivity and with almost cartoonishness, and this take on it is very different. It's very dark, it's very grim, it's very scary. So I've enjoyed watching it a lot. But they kind of started this roll with that, and then once they got closer to the end of the year, December 21st, they dropped Birdbox, and Birdbox went absolutely insane, and everybody started watching it. I mean, at this point now, I believe the number is very close to 50 million different, unique accounts having watched the movie, which is absolutely absurd, because if you think about how much money that movie would have made if you charge $10 a ticket like a theater does, although I don't know if as many people would watch it if they had to pay for it directly in a theater setting, but still, 50 million unique accounts within, 2.5 weeks is ridiculous. Then After they added Bird Box, Christmas morning they added Avengers Infinity War, so of course that got ridiculous viewership numbers. I've already watched it twice since they put it on there. You know, it was definitely one of the best movies of this year, one of the most important movies of this year, and, you know, kind of establishing the landscape for Hollywood. So I think a lot of people were very excited that they added that. Then they dropped the bombshell that, yeah, fifth season of Black Mirror is coming up, but we have a movie for you. And the movie that they have is not only just a Black Mirror movie, which would have made people happy enough, it's completely interactive. There's a ton of different points within the movie of Bandersnatch that are interactive and where you're presented with two choices, and whichever choice you make changes the scene that you're about to get to. So they definitely had this big wave of just partial original content and partially getting the rights to certain things to establish themselves even further up on the list. Because while I do enjoy, there are things that are on Hulu that are not on Netflix that I enjoy, and I do enjoy using Hulu sometimes. Amazon Prime Video kind of lags behind them a little bit. They kind of fulfill a different role, a different niche in the community, in that I find a lot of older movies like 40s, 50s, 60s on Amazon Prime Video, which is good. But I think that this whole roll into the new year is another example of how Netflix is just completely dominating the video streaming service. And I get that, you know, it makes sense because they were kind of the first big one, but they have definitely done the most work to establish themselves as the dominant force in that field. And that even includes, you know, keeping the rights to The Office and to Friends. While they did pull a little stunt of someone starting to say, oh, Netflix is getting rid of Friends, retweet this, blah, blah, blah. And Netflix is like, hey, guys, we never were getting rid of it. The two most watched shows on our streaming service are The Office and Friends. And I think the people in there, you know, the people that work for them on the board understand that if they got rid of either one of those, their numbers would tank. Because someone actually put up, it's like how many accounts per 24 hours watch at least like 4 episodes of The Office and Friends. And The Office was number one by a ridiculous amount. But Friends was the next one up. And so I think that they kind of understand, hey, there's certain things on here that we cannot get rid of, that we will not get rid of. And so it kind of makes you wonder, like I'm going to talk about later with all the social media marketing stuff. It's like, okay, were they really going to take off Friends for a moment and then realize how bad it was and change their minds? Or did someone just think, hey, I could get a lot of attention on social media if I say that this is going away? So Netflix kind of had that dominant role going into the new year. And actually part of that is that Netflix is at a point now where they can pick and choose when legitimate movies are made with big time casts. Even if they're bad, they can deny them now. And that's what happened with Sony's new comedic mess that's Holmes and Watson, starring Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly. So when these trailers first came out for this movie, I was kind of, I don't know if excited was the word for it, but I was ready for it because I love all the movies that they've done together and they're always hilarious. This was an interesting premise for them to take a comedic tone on Sherlock Holmes and Watson. So at first I was really ready for it. Once the second and third trailer dropped and then the TV spots started coming out, I realized that this movie is going to be horrible. It's going to be a really bad movie. This movie has been an absolute mess for Sony to try to put together. At one point, they did test screenings of it. People were walking out in large numbers from test screenings. They couldn't get enough people to sign on for a secondary round of test screenings. They attempted to sell the movie and the rights to Netflix, and Netflix told them no. I think that's definitely a big moment in the grand scheme of where Hollywood and streaming services kind of will meet, because there's been a couple instances of movies that are created for theaters. There's, for two off the top of my head, Bird Box and The Ritual were both made for a full-scale theatrical release, and when they knew it wasn't going to do as well as they thought, Netflix bought them out, and they both survived, and they both even thrived. I'll say, I won't even say survived. They thrived on Netflix. So the idea that Netflix would not buy this movie from Sony shows that it's just that's how bad it is. That's how awful it is. The reviews that I've seen so far, I've seen it being given 20s and 30s out of 100. They say that the only reason they give them those points is because it's a movie that was actually finished, and there's a couple of people that you don't expect to see with cameos in it. But other than that, the comedy falls flat. And they don't work well together, which is a surprise because they usually work impeccably together. And there's actually now a story circulating around that different people in different parts of the United States have seen different opening scenes for the movie. One describes a situation where one of the two characters is being bullied in grade school and the other one helps stick up for them. Another one describes a situation where one of them is going to jump out of his window into the garden and the other one's saying, "Oh no, don't jump into this garden, I just finished it, jump into that one." And so the idea that there's two different opening scenes to this movie means that one reel that theaters are showing is the finished product and the other one might still be the movie from the test screenings. And Sony was so, I guess, lazy or done with having to deal with this movie that they distributed the test screening reel to places across the United States. And that is just ridiculous. That's just, if you're going to give up on a movie that bad, don't offer it to the biggest streaming service. Offer it to literally anybody who's going to buy it. If you don't want to put the effort into sending the right reel to theaters, then why even do it? Why send the reels if you're going to send two different versions and send the wrong one? I would get it if they made it a regional deal, if they made it so that, like, oh, you have a one in so many chance of seeing this opening scene, oh, this and that and this and that. But that's not what they're aiming for here. The opening scene was the same opening scene from the test screenings. So they're just absolutely dropping the ball on this one. It's tough enough that the movie sucked, and now they're going to have this mess around it where, oh, this movie's so bad Netflix doesn't want to buy it, and this movie's so bad they gave up on it, and they sent the wrong reels out places. At this point, I have to say I'm very intrigued, and I just want to go. I want to go see it just to see how bad it is. Usually, when a movie comes out like this and it gets torn apart like this, my intrigue skyrockets, and I just have to witness it for myself. I did the same thing with the Emoji Movie, and trust me, I fully regret it, but I had to. So it was really interesting to me to see that we're at a point now where even when a movie would probably be pretty cheap for Netflix to buy out the rights to and show, they kind of had a standard. They kind of said, hey, we don't want to spend money on this content. And the fact that a streaming service can tell a major Hollywood distributor like Sony, we don't want to spend the money on this, is big. That means that streaming services are really catching up with their original content, and they're starting to get to a point where they can actually prioritize quality over quantity. Because originally it was the idea that if they put out a shit ton of their original content, somebody's bound to pick one and stick to it. There's bound to be something that succeeds. So they're at first when they started doing original content, they just put it out in the masses. And now I think they're at the point where they can say, hey, we want to make this and we want to make it really good, or we want to buy this from you because it's really good, but it's not going to survive in theaters because of your budget. So I think it's definitely important that we are at that point now where a streaming service can tell a major Hollywood distributor no. Another thing that's happened very recently is, we always get trailers in circulation, and it's kind of been a down point because a lot of the movies that people were anticipating came out at the end of 2018 in December. We have a couple coming out here and there. You got Captain Marvel coming out in March, got Glass coming out very soon, but a lot of the movies that people are excited for this year are centered around April and May. So it's been a down time for trailers because all those movies have trailers that are already out. So even when I was at the theater and seeing Aquaman, there was one trailer that I hadn't seen before out of the 7 shown, and it was actually very disappointing. It was a movie that's coming out, I believe, in February, and it's like The Kid That Will Be King, and trust me, it does not look like a movie that I want to go see. But a trailer that did come out that I am very excited for is Jordan Peele's Us. That movie definitely looks like he is going to do what he did with Get Out. It's going to be a absolute success. It looks awesome. There's definitely the same kind of artistic choices that were in Get Out. There's similar camera angles. He has this importance in it, which I think is awesome, of showing a full-scale nuclear black family. There's other influences throughout with, 90s hip-hop, with him wearing a Howard sweatshirt in the trailer. And there's definitely an importance about these things in the movie. So I think it's going to be awesome to see that present in a horror movie. And I think that he's kind of made it his precedent to break the stigma that minorities die first in horror movies, or hey, they just serve one or two roles within the movie. I think that he's breaking that precedent and saying, hey, check this out. We can make these movies about minorities and they can work, and they're actually really damn good. That trailer looks awesome. It's still kind of... The plot's still kind of murky. You can't really tell a whole lot about it. You get the sense that it's going to be this family fighting off what looks to be doppelgangers of themselves. But the artistic choice of those all red outfits with the brown leather gloves and the gold scissors, I think is going to be really important, because you do still have to have certain things that stick out. You have to have stills, you have to have marketing images that stick out compared to everything else. And he did that with Get Out. He had the idea of the sunken place, he had the pictures, he had the stills, he had the guy running, he had him sitting in the chair while he's being hypnotized crying. And so I think he's always done a great job of understanding that. But I think that he's already established one of the biggest images surrounding this movie, and the movie doesn't come out for a while. So I mean, it definitely looks promising. I was excited about it when they announced it. I'm even more excited about it now with this trailer. It's definitely part of this upward trajectory that horror movies have been on over the past 2 years that I think is going to skyrocket in 2019. But I'm going to talk about that way later. But I'm very excited to see this trailer. I'm very excited to see where this goes. I'm very excited for Jordan Peele, since he has the Twilight Zone reboot coming up and the Candyman reboot coming up, and that if this movie's a success, we're going to see him become a prevalent enough figure, almost like James Wan or Wes Craven. We're definitely going to see him be pushed to the forefront of horror movies, and not only just horror movies, but horror movies that really kind of get us talking and get us going about things that are happening in the real world. So I'll be very happy if that movie does as well as it looks like it's going to. We're going to have another name in going down in history. We're going to have another legend that we are going to get to see watch bloom into his legendary status in front of us. I mean, he's very close already with the cultural impact that Get Out had. And so I think that if he has this movie succeeding, if the Twilight Zone reboot succeeds, I think after that Twilight Zone reboot, I mean, he'll be cemented. He'll be there. He will be the horror movie name that you want to hear directing your movie. So I'm very excited to hear about that. Very excited for the trajectory that horror is going on. And, yeah. Alright, so next up on the list, we have a full-scale review of the currently running DC superhero solo movie, Aquaman. We had already been introduced to Aquaman back in Justice League in 2017. We had seen him throughout part of the movie as he joined the crew. We kind of got a dynamic of his character in that we knew he was going to be one of the goofy ones. He was going to be a source of one-liners. He was going to kind of resemble what Thor does in some of the Avengers movies. We didn't get a full, we don't get a full scale into how he became what he became. We don't get an origin story. We don't get really a full display of his powers. We just know that he's really strong and that he was very prominent in the movie. They needed him very much in the Justice League. And so going into this, there had been, I had seen trailers for this for a while. It was a very anticipated December release. I feel like my opinions differ from a lot of people's on this movie. I was very disappointed by it. I'm going to end up giving this movie a 5 out of 10, which is actually a lot better than what I was going to give it the couple minutes I left the theater. Because upon the actual viewing, like, my immediate reaction was two things. The movie was way too long, and it was written by a 4-year-old. Like, the dialogue in the movie feels very choppy, feels very misplaced. The one-liners in the movie, a lot of them fall incredibly flat. I mean, I can remember 2 or 3 times sitting in the theater that was a pretty packed theater, and someone in the movie saying a one-liner, and I mean, not even a courteous dad chuckle. I mean, like, these are guys that are telling jokes like, "Hi, hungry, I'm dad." Like, they're not even giving it a chuckle. They're just, it's dead silent after a one-liner. There are a lot of good things about this movie the more that I thought about it after I left the theater. Like I said, my initial reaction, the dialogue was bad and choppy. There's really bad acting at certain points. The guy that they casted to play Black Manta, I love the character, and I love that they were trying to include him in it. He really did not do well in that character, and part of it is his fault in that he wasn't the greatest actor during it, and part of it was that they didn't give him a large enough role in the movie for him to really establish any kind of character details. And I love Amber Heard in this movie just because she's eye candy throughout most of the movie, and I think in the back, like, third of the movie, she kind of starts, getting better, but for most of this movie, she feels really out of place in her acting, and it feels really disconnected. You don't really get a sense of a romantic chemistry between her and Aquaman almost at all throughout most of the movie, and then just, like, at the end of it, you know it's coming throughout the movie, but, like, it just feels kind of rushed. I think that there's a lot of good things about this movie. The fighting choreography in this movie throughout is awesome. I mean, the opening scene, the fight choreography inside of the lighthouse is awesome, along with the camera angles that they chose. It looked different than almost anything I'd ever seen. It was very video game-esque in the best way possible, with the camera tracking all the movements. The underwater fighting was unique. It didn't look like a fighting style that you see a lot. They did a very good job at incorporating different movements underwater with it. It didn't just look like two people fist fighting underwater. It really looked like two creatures fighting each other. And they definitely incorporated the tridents well, and they kind of did a good job of giving Aquaman... It's difficult to describe it, but it's like his fighting style feels a little bit more Islander. It feels a little bit more risky. It feels a little bit more, attack-oriented. While most of the Atlanteans, including his half-brother, feel very defensive. They feel very dead set. They feel very orchestrated. And his kind of seems a little bit more spontaneous. So it was kind of cool to see the difference in fighting styles between different characters. You get a lot of flashback scenes that really just don't hit their mark, that are supposed to be about him learning Aquaman, Arthur Curry, learning who he is, learning how to fight, learning how to use a trident, learning how to swim. And they really do kind of feel out of place, and they're made to feel even more awkward with a de-aged William Dafoe, which really feels weird. I found myself forgetting that he was in the movie a couple times. But the CGI in the movie is very good. I have to give them credit on that. With most of the movie happening underwater, it was very important for them to nail the CGI, especially with all the different creatures and buildings and stuff like that they were going to see. I don't think that there was anything that looked bad. I don't think that there were 1 or 2 things that I think actually looked almost incredible. I loved the... There's a creature later on in the movie. I don't want to spoil it just yet. I haven't gotten into the spoiler section. But it looks very good. He looks very good underwater. There's a great dynamic in the audio where they kind of added the effect of being underwater to their voices. I think that was a very important touch on the movie and a very important detail that a lot of people would look over. It made it actually feel like they were underwater. the coloring of the movie, it didn't seem. That's one thing I'll give them against most DC. DC ran into a problem because a lot of their movies felt muted. A lot of their movies felt super, like, hyper realism, super straight to the point. This is what's going to happen in the real world to these people. And I think Justice League started to stray from that a little bit. Wonder Woman strayed pretty far, and I think that's why it did such a good job, even though it incorporated World War One. And this one was the first DC movie I think that we've seen that really just went off the deep end. It's super colorful. There's a bunch of CG. There's a bunch of attempts to be funny. So I think this was a turning point for DC, because while I didn't like it as much, a lot of people do, and it's making a bunch of money. So I think this may be a turning point for them, and that they can kind of pick things back up with Wonder Woman and this movie doing so well. I think that they now have the basis that they need to build the rest of their universe upon. Starting to get into spoilers. Like I said, I gave this movie a 5 out of 10. Starting to get into spoilers for it a little bit. The plot line was kind of drawn out, and I think it's good that they had, kind of his origin story in it, but they kept adding too much detail in the wrong places. We got a lot more of his brother trying to unite the Seven Seas rather than him becoming the true Aquaman and the true king of the Seven Seas. It definitely felt like there was this really tiny 15-minute window of him finally becoming what he should be, and I felt like that should have taken more of a precedent over some of the other aspects of the movie. The movie drags on. I have to say, there are parts of the movie that I enjoyed, but it just goes on forever. It's a 2.5-hour movie, and I don't think there's any necessity for a solo superhero movie to be any longer than 2 hours. I think that when you have multiple superheroes in it, you can get away with 2.5, and I mean, hell, Endgame is going to try to get away with 3. But I think that when you look at it, especially with a character that hasn't had a solid foundation yet, you can't ask people to sit in the theater that long. So that was kind of a difficult part of it. I remember being about like halfway through the movie, and I looked over at my sister, and she turned her phone to me, and I looked at it, and it was 2 hours and 23 minutes, I think is the runtime. I was like, okay, that's not the worst. She said, we're an hour and 20 minutes in, and I said, holy shit, this is going to take forever. But like I said, the movie's a little too long, and the pacing's really off. I think the pacing has to do with the problems in the plot. There is an aspect of the plot that I am glad about, that they did a little bit of an origin story, and they kind of mixed in a new plot, but there are parts of it that just seem like they're focusing on the wrong thing. The biggest part of the plot that I have a problem with is the fact that they tried to include Black Manta and really didn't. I mean, he was in the very first scene of the movie that we get to see Aquaman in. He was in one of the most important scenes where they figure out where they have to go to find the trident. And he just kind of felt like a waste of a character. I mean, I get that they didn't want to put the focus on one villain and that they wanted to build a villain for his future. But if you're going to do that, put in his origin as part of the end of the plot. Don't include him as a legitimate character in one and not give him enough screen time for people to make a connection to. I thought that his costume felt goofy. I think it felt 1950s-esque. I think it was completely different than the rest of the movie. The actor didn't do the greatest job. The lines for him were horribly written. And he just really felt out of place. And I felt bad because he's a great character. And there are a lot of people that were very excited to see him in it. And it's definitely a time where his kind of character would succeed, because you look for strong villains, and that's one of the strongest villains in Aquaman, but this time it just really did not work to include him in it. Like I said, there was bad acting in it, there was horrible writing of the dialogue. One of the things that really threw me off, and a lot of times I can get past this in movies, but this time I really couldn't. The music for this movie fucking sucked. I mean, it was some of the worst movie music I've ever heard. And that's just talking about the soundtrack music that's made by actual musical artists, not necessarily the score. The score wasn't the worst in the world. They kind of tried to incorporate a little bit of an island feel, a little bit of the rock guitars that we got with Wonder Woman. I don't think that they're ever going to hit the nail on the head like they did with Wonder Woman, because it's so easy to associate her. For people who have seen Batman vs. Superman and Wonder Woman more than once, it's super easy to associate her with the guitars coming in, the... So I think that they tried to do that with him a little bit, and it would fit his character, but it just feels like it's already been done and it's already been locked in on someone else. So I think that there were times that they tried to do what was correct in the formula for Wonder Woman, except it didn't work with this character. But the best way to make people understand how bad the actual, like, legitimate music was for this, the single that was released from this movie, and they put it in an absolutely fucking horrible time in this movie, but it was Pitbull and Sia, and the chorus of the song is a remade version of Africa by Toto. I love that song. I'm pretty sure everybody loves that song. It's a great song. You know, it got its reemergence within the past year because of memes and stuff like that. I just have one question. Why the fuck do you think it's a good idea to get Pitbull onto your movie soundtrack? And then, after you've made the bad decision to get one of the notoriously worst artists in the music industry on your movie soundtrack, why did you think it was a good idea for him to remake a classic that people never wanted you to touch? It made my head ache. It made me hurt. And the other music in the movie besides that song, it really all feels like 70s, 80s synthwave that doesn't fit into this story at all. Give me something with a little bit of an island feel. Give me something with a little bit of... You could even go with the rock feel. Give me something a little bit heavy. You know, he's a big dude with long hair and a bunch of tattoos. Give me something with some heavy-ass drums and guitars. And it doesn't have to be a score like with Wonder Woman. Give me legitimate rock music. Give me vocals. Give me, you know, shredding guitar. It could work. But they made this fucking awful decision to bring in synthesizers and calm 80s, like, prom music, and it just does not work. And let me tell you one thing. They put this horrible shit show Pitbull Sia song in on a scene that was already horribly written. They had jumped out of an airplane into the water, and when they were getting out of the water, it was this slow-mo Baywatch scene of, like, Jason Momoa in a wet white t-shirt and Amber Heard in a wet white t-shirt. And it was like 30 seconds of them walking slow-mo up the beach, and you have to hear fucking Pitbull over over Africa by Toto. Sorry. But it made me so mad that I can't even think about it without, you know, slurring my words together. Like, whoever thought that was a good idea needs to be fucking fired today, if not yesterday. I mean, oh my god. Who sat there and watched that 45 seconds of the movie and said, you know what? This is really it. This is going to be a defining point in the movie. This is a great transition between plot points. People are going to love it. People are going to love this song. You got a little sexy moment. No. Fuck no. This scene is out of the picture. You already have your sex appeal in the movie. You made Mara's costume super low cut. You made Jason Momoa shirtless for 75% of the movie. You're good. You don't need any more sex appeal. You don't need to go out of your way to bring it in. You are good. People are not looking for it anymore in superhero movies, and you already put it in there too much. You don't need more of it. Stop fucking putting sex appeal in movies. People don't care about it in superhero movies. Give us a good superhero story with good actors, good dialogue, and good CG. We don't care if the heroine is barely wearing any clothes. We don't care if the superhero doesn't have a shirt on. Just give us a good story, a good villain, and some good CG. Hell, I'll take bad dialogue at this point. I'll take people not even having their words matched to their mouths. Just stop focusing so much on having to sell these people as sex symbols when they're superheroes. I mean, I understand that sex always sells in movies and music and TV and everything else, but, like, we've already proven that we don't need it in the superhero movies. They're working on their own with good stories and good, you know, characters. Like, Avengers has officially given up on the whole sex appeal aspect of it. Like, they had, when Black Widow first started in Iron Man 2, they got it out of the way. When they introduced Scarlet Witch, they gave her a super low-cut costume at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron. They got it out of the way. She dresses normally now. I mean, they had Chris Evans shirtless when he was jacked in Captain America. They've gotten it out of the way, and the movies that don't feature it anymore, the movies that have these intricate stories where characters have good chemistry and form relationships, are what works for them. That's why Infinity War made so much money, because it focused on how these characters were coming together and building relationships when they had never met each other before to serve one common goal of saving the universe. And, nobody cared what anybody was wearing in that movie. The only time anybody cared was because Spider-Man got the cool Iron Spider suit and Iron Man got new armor. Other than that, nobody gives a fuck what they're wearing. And it just made me so mad watching this scene, because it's like, have we devolved this much? Has DC really missed the mark that much in most of their movies that they felt that this was necessary? I hate going on rants like this, and I hate, going off topic, but this 45 seconds of this movie made me so mad sitting in the theater that I was just about to drop the rest of the movie. I didn't care how it ended. The movie, I was going to say the movie sucked. I didn't care. I was so mad. Eventually, because there was enough time, that kind of cooled off, but I was so pissed about this one specific part. To get to other parts of the movie, there were better things later on in the movie. The final fight was kind of cool to see different dynamics of it. You do get to see the brines, the land of the brines, which was cool because they were all unique CG crab-like creatures. In that scene, you finally get to see the Kraken. I forget what its name is in the movie, but it's a fucking Kraken. I told my sister, because sitting in there, it's right before that, the dinosaur scene. You find out that in the Trench Kingdom, there's just this land of lost time, and there's fucking dinosaurs still living, because if a movie's not doing well, just add fucking dinosaurs in the last third of it. But they're like, oh man, let's talk about this mythical creature that guards the trident. Okay, he gets past the creature, he tames the creature, he can control the creature with the trident. And my sister was like, it's going to be either a dinosaur or a whale, because he has these connections to whales throughout most of the movie. And I said, no, I think it's going to be a Kraken. I'm pretty sure they're going to include a Kraken in an Aquaman movie. She was like, no, it's going to be a whale. First time that thing came out of the rocks, I said, it's a fucking Kraken. I called it, it's a Kraken. And I'm glad that I called it, because it actually looked really cool. It was a somewhat unique design that was a little bit closer to a Clash of Titans Kraken rather than a Pirates of the Caribbean Kraken, so it was definitely cool to see it come out in the last little part of the movie, and I'd love to see it in future movies, especially in Justice League and them and team-up movies. So that was definitely a boost at the end of it, was to see these unique creatures and to see all the CG work well together. At the end of the day, like I said, there was a lot of parts of this movie that were disappointing. There's more parts that are better about it now that I sit down and think about it, but my immediate reaction leaving the theater was I was very upset, I was very disappointed. I don't know why I spent that money on it, but looking back on it, there are things that are better. Like I said, I gave it a 5 out of 10 because there's still way too much wrong with it to give it a good score. I think it sits right in the middle of the pack. It has some good things about it, but it has a lot that's wrong with it. If DC continues going on the trajectory that they're on, I really hope that they can work him in with the Justice League a little bit better. I don't want him to have to carry the weight on his shoulders as a solo character. Although right now it kind of looks like DC is going to have Wonder Woman carry the weight of their universe on her shoulders because she succeeded at all of it a little bit better than the rest of them. But it was a disappointing watch at first. It gets better once you sit down and think about it. But prepare yourself in the theater because there's going to be a lot that you get disappointed and mad at while sitting and watching it. So solid 5 out of 10. If you're a dedicated superhero movie watcher, I definitely think that you should go see it. There are good things involved in the superhero universe with it. But if you're a normal moviegoer and you haven't seen any of these, I would not recommend it. It's going to be a little rough for someone who's not used to these kind of movies. So 5 out of 10. Go see it if you like superheroes. If not, you're going to be disappointed.
He needs some milk.
Alrighty, let's get into a little bit more of a positive note, the other movie that I wanted to talk about today is a Netflix original. At least Netflix bought the rights to it before a massive theatrical release, and that's Birdbox, starring Sandra Bullock. This movie, a lot of people don't really have any choice in watching it because it got frequently talked about on Twitter as soon as it was released. It did have a little bit of hype growing around it in kind of the horror community because it definitely felt like it was going to be closer to a horror movie. It ended up being a little closer to like a thriller, kind of like an action thriller. I don't think that takes away from it at all. This movie felt a lot like A Quiet Place, in that it's taking away one of your main senses and you having to figure out how to live without it. Within the movie, you cannot look at these things that have inhabited Earth or else you're going to die. Throughout the movie, there's definitely star power in it. You have Sandra Bullock, you have John Malkovich, you have MGK for some reason. And I think that there's a lot of difficulty in the chemistry between everybody that's in it during the beginning. I understand that there's not necessarily supposed to be a ton of chemistry because of the fact that, like, you're in the middle of surviving the apocalypse. You're not going to know these people very well, so I don't think that you're expected to, get along with all these people perfectly. You're kind of forced into this situation, but you definitely want to see a little bit more chemistry between the characters than you do. I think that the idea for the plot was not necessarily original, but it was well done. I think it was decently written. So, like I said, some of the dialogue and some of the chemistry between the characters really does kind of fall off throughout the movie. I gave it a 7 out of 10 because I enjoyed watching it. I think there are good performances in it. I think there's good ideas throughout it. I don't think I could give it any higher because there's not a whole lot in the movie that really stands out. There's not anything in this movie that's groundbreaking, that makes you really love it, that really kind of puts it ahead of anything else in its kind of subcategory now as we start to see there's going to be more horror movies that are dependent upon loss of senses. But I don't think there's anything that really put this ahead of anything else, and I think that's why it was weird that so many people have watched it. Like I said earlier, it's sitting at like 50 million unique accounts watching it on Netflix. And so I think that there is an element to it that while it's a Netflix original, it's actually pretty good for something that Netflix has made. And I think that if it had gotten a theatrical release, I don't think it would have done this well. I don't think as many people would have seen it. I don't think as many people would have given it such a high rating. I definitely don't think it would have succeeded as well as it did. I think it was a better version of M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening. The plot lines are very similar. I think this one takes a little bit different of a route for the better because The Happening is really not good. There was a bunch of really shitty acting, shitty writing, shitty plot line, everything. And this definitely kind of improves upon those aspects. I do like that at times they focus more on the characters and the interactions of people like during the apocalypse and how they're going to learn to survive rather than focusing on the monsters themselves. It's for it not being a found footage movie, it's very similar to found footage in that you don't get to see the monsters at all, and so I think that kind of, it does a good job at playing on that. I think that the ending is actually really cool. I'm not going to spoil it now. I'll wait a little bit to spoil it and I'll give you guys a warning. I think the ending is pretty cool, and I think it's pretty inventive and ingenuitive for it. I feel like it's happened before in other movies, but not anything that I can recall immediately. I want to say that it's not fair to this movie that it felt underwhelming, but it felt underwhelming because of its social media presence, and I kind of want to talk about that after I finish reviewing it, because that's kind of a big deal of how this movie got to where it was. But there's good performances in it, there's decent action in it, there's a lot of really cool, subtle things that are very difficult to talk about without spoiling it. Like I said, it's a 7 out of 10. I definitely recommend that people watch it. It's definitely one of the better movies that have been on Netflix, made by them. It's a downtime in the year for movies that are coming out. We have 2 or 3 months until that Captain Marvel and Avengers and Godzilla and all that kind of stuff comes out in April. So I definitely take, the 2 to 2.5 hours that it takes for this movie to sit down and watch it. I think that there are good performances and that it's definitely worth the watch. Um, Kind of getting into the spoiler aspect of it, I do like that it's not necessarily a monster attacking you. It's that the sight of these things make you go crazy and kind of lose your mind and commit suicide. And then I like it they have the added dimension of that people who are already insane and like people who are already in institutions can see these things and don't feel the need to kill themselves, but rather let everyone else in the world see them. I think that there's a cool kind of aspect to it that these things are seen as spirits that are coming to punish the earth, rather than just some alien or some creature that erupts out of nowhere. I think it's cool that they kind of added in that almost religious and spiritualistic kind of ideas into it. Um, Again, I think this movie's just disappointing because of how high of expectations people have for it. But I think it did a lot. I think the touch on the eyes when they see the creature is really cool. I do think that it was cool that they showed Sandra Bullock's character Mallory and her husband, I guess if that's what you want to call him, Tom. I think it's cool that they show their kids how to survive in this world, teaching them the skills for it. That they really kind of get a system down pat. Because, they showed that they've survived in this world without sight outside of houses for 5-something years. Like, it's cool to see that they kind of understood how the world works at that point. I think it's kind of rough to watch the scenes of Mallory with the two children on her own. And I think that's on purpose. I do think that they did take a good artistic take on this, because she struggles with communication and relationships before all of these world-ending events happen. And I think that there's still this kind of block, even though she doesn't really have a choice. Tom and the kids are the only things that matter to her. It's kind of shitty, and I think they did it on purpose, that she doesn't even give the kids names until she knows that they're safe. She still has difficulties, and she's in love with Tom, and she still has difficulties in communicating with him. So when it gets down to her and the children only, yeah, I think Tom and Charlie's deaths shouldn't have happened, but that's beside the point. When it gets down to her and the children only, it's kind of tough to watch because she's really treating these children like adults. And you understand in your head, you're like, yeah, they're going to survive. Yeah, this is what they need to do. But at the same time, you find yourself sitting there thinking, man, this is rough. Like, this hurts to see people talk to children this way. And again, you come back to the realization of if they're going to survive, you got to be a little rough. You got to be a little, tough to them. It's got to be tough love. I do think that the scene where she's trying to decide which child they'll take their blindfold off and go through the rapids, that's definitely one of the better movie scenes I've seen in a while, because you just feel the emotion of it. And I think it's cool that she finally breaks herself off from this stone-hearted character and says, you know what, neither of you are going to do it, we're going to be alright. The plot twist ending of them finding the school for the blind, I thought was really cool, because it's like, of course these people are going to survive. They can walk around and just go anywhere without having to wear blindfolds. The fact that they had the sanctuary set up for people, they have the birds around them to warn everybody when these creatures are coming. There's canopies of trees above this thing from the wild growth of the years, and I definitely think that it was a really cool kind of plot twist ending to it, because I definitely thought there was still going to be some animosity and still some tension at the end of it, and they kind of resolve it. I love that she named the children at the end of it. There's characters that you've seen before in the movie. She sees her doctor from when she was pregnant. I think the baby delivery scene in the halfway point of the movie is tough to watch. That's definitely a good scene. But this movie, kind of getting into what makes this movie so difficult, is the whole social media aspect of it. For the first 3 days since this movie came out, it seemed like there was an abnormally large number of people tweeting memes and about how good the movie was. And it kind of seemed a little out of place, because there had been movies that, a lot of people talk about before on Twitter. You have your Avengers, you have your Spider-Man, you have your all kind of different movies. But this one just kind of seemed it felt inorganic, and a lot of people really thought that there were people on Twitter being paid to promote this movie. And if you go back to when the memes first started about this, that like when the memes first started, they came from bot accounts. They came from accounts with 0 followers, and people just started interacting with these tweets, and it kind of made it take off. It kind of made these memes really become viral, and it feels unfair to the movie and unfair to the viewers that so many people were talking about this movie and seemed like they fell in love with it, and it's not as good as you would think. I still think the movie was good. Like I said, I gave it a 7 out of 10, but it definitely does kind of seem sketchy and shady that Netflix probably paid people and probably had their own people inorganically create memes and a bunch of viral nonsense about this movie to get people to watch it. The memes are funny, I'll give it to them, and it's definitely an aspect that I could see people, focusing on, because having to wear a blindfold during something is easy meme material for videos, and the pictures of her on the boat looking lost with her blindfold on, it's easy to use, it's easy material. But for how big it got so quickly, it felt really inorganic, and it made me kind of sit down and think, okay, someone is being paid to talk about this movie. Someone is being paid to make memes about this movie to get people to watch it. So I felt bad, because there's definitely a sense of disappointment that you get from the movie because of what happened on Twitter with it. Like I said, it's still a good watch. It's a 7 out of 10. If you like thriller movies, watch it. If you have downtime and you can't find anything to watch, give it a watch. It's a good two and a half hours. It's worth your time. There's good performances in it, but it's utterly disappointing purely because of the fact that it was so disgustingly hyped up on social media.
Mission failed. We'll get 'em next time.
Alright, last thing on today's to-do list is my 5 for 5 things I'm excited for in 2019. We've gotten a lot of trailers, we've gotten a lot of movie news, and we definitely have a very packed first half of this year. Some of this list will be taking place in that first half of the year, and some of it will be in the back half of it. Some of it we've seen trailers for, some of it we haven't, and so on and so on. This is my personal top 5, as I always kind of preface these with. And there's going to be a lot of things that I missed that actually I'm really excited for. It's just, even after looking through the list and researching everything, I probably still forgot them. But kicking off my 5 for 5 things I'm excited for in 2019, number 5 is the movie Detective Pikachu. This movie is coming at a great time because I definitely think that there is a re-emergence of Pokemon in pop culture within the past 2 to 3 years. Especially with Pokemon Go being so successful back in 2015 and 2016. And then it's seeing a re-emergence with its second highest numbers ever in the past year due to updated features. Add on top of that the success of Pokemon Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and them going back and remaking the original Pokemon movie, which I believe they're supposed to do next year, and even going back and recreating that first interaction between Ash and Pikachu into a full movie. I think that the nostalgia wave is definitely at its highest point, and so with that and kind of animation hitting another high point, animation never really dies, but there's definitely a new artistic wave in animation with the success of Christopher Robin into this movie, into the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which looks like shit, by the way, but I'm not going to go there. That there's this new animation style of making things look fuzzy and furry and stuff like that, and I think this movie's definitely going to capitalize on that. Watching the trailer, just seeing everything from my childhood and now that I'm remembering from Pokemon Go, everything, all of the Pokemon look good. As much as people have disputes over how they should look, I think that they look spectacular. I think they look accurate. I think that Justice Smith and Ryan Reynolds will have good chemistry between the two characters of that main character we get and Detective Pikachu. I think it's cool that they're adding in an outside plot line other than just standard Pokemon battles, because that would not work and support a blockbuster movie. This movie is scheduled for release in May, and I'm super excited to see it, partially because of a personal bias and that I spent hours upon hours upon hours upon almost days and weeks in Pokemon games when I was younger, so it's definitely a big part of my personality and kind of my childhood. But I think that there's going to be a lot of people who can take their kids to see this even without knowing anything about Pokemon. I mean, I think there's definitely going to be a factor of families going to see it that don't know what's going on with it. But like I said, the animation of it looks really cool. The characters of it are going to be interesting. The whole idea of Pikachu being able to talk to only one person is going to be awesome to see in the movie. And I'm very excited to see this. It was actually funny because sitting and watching Aquaman, my mom and I actually play Pokemon Go a lot together whenever I'm back home from school. And so that trailer started and we both got like super excited. We were like, hell yeah. And it was funny because on the other side of me, my dad was like, why are they making a movie about Pokemon? So it was kind of funny to see the dynamic in the theater of certain people being like, oh hell yeah, this is going to be awesome. And people being like, why are they spending so much money on this? But personally, I am very excited for this to come out. I'm very ready for it. I've been ready for it since the trailer released. I was kind of skeptical about it when they first released the idea, but it's really grown on me, and I'm super excited to see Detective Pikachu in May. My number 4 most thing I'm excited for in 2019, however the fuck I'm supposed to word that, is actually Godzilla King of the Monsters. So I loved the 2014 Godzilla. I think it did a lot of things very well to help bring back the character. I think that the new design of Godzilla just being absolutely freakishly massive is working. I think giving, people a role in the movie a little bit more than just them trying to fight Godzilla, rather than them dealing with the consequences of it being around and what it has to fight, was good. And then on top of that, Kong Skull Island was really good too, and you got really good character interactions in that. We got a new Kong that I think looks awesome. And so building upon those two movies and releasing this movie that's going to come out in May, we get to see a bunch of different monsters that we haven't seen in a long time. We get to see Mothra, we get to see Ghidorah, we get to see Rodan, and they all look really good. The newest trailers that are coming out now that show the characters themselves and show the monsters, they look good. The animation looks good. It looks like there's going to be a decent storyline following along it. We have a couple faces that people will be able to recognize, and Millie Bobby Brown. It's going to be... I'm very excited for it because I think it's going to be part of the re-emergence of massive monster movies. Like, just these crazy creatures that have unique designs and are just huge. I would love to see them continue this Godzilla trend. We're going to get a Godzilla vs. King Kong movie in 2020. But I'm very excited for this. I'm very excited to see how these monsters look on screen in this movie. There's even really beautiful character posters that they released that's just these massive portraits almost of the monsters that are going to be in it. And I'm very excited to see where they take this plot line and how they handle the creatures and their dynamics between each other. Because a lot of people don't understand that there's different relationships between different monsters in the Godzilla universe. You have instances where Godzilla fights Mothra, and you have instances where they fight together. The same thing with Rodan. The one thing that's certain is most of the time King Ghidorah is a villainous monster, but you have these dynamics that establish themselves throughout all of the franchises. And I'm really interested to see what kind of storylines they pick here. I'm interested to see if you have a fatal 4-way match between these four, for people who understand wrestling terms. If you have a fatal 4-way for this, do you have a tag team? Do you have a 2 versus 1 versus 1? I want to see how they handle the relationships between these monsters and the relationship between these monsters and the humans in the story. I'm very excited to see how they handle all this and to see where this franchise is going to go. My third thing that I am most excited for in 2019, got at that time, is John Wick 3 Parabellum. The first 2 John Wick movies are untouched. I mean, I have never seen a movie so streamlined and so straight to the point in their genre and be so efficient at it. The first 2 movies are just nothing but action. I mean, it's well choreographed, well thought out, unique action that you don't see all the time. And they somehow manage to flush out this world, they world build and they establish character relations and stuff like that when there's very little dialogue and there's very little storytelling in the movie aside from the action that happens. And it's amazing to me that they've done such a good job of not only building themselves a foundation but really establishing themselves as a long-lasting, franchise, and setting themselves up for, a ton of movies, TV shows, everything. I mean, they did such a good job, especially in John Wick 2, of understanding what their fan base wanted, understanding why people liked the first one, and building directly upon it. I mean, and the crazy part is that Keanu Reeves is now at like the height of his career, which we thought was never going to be possible after he was in the Matrix movies. We didn't think he was going to get any higher than that. I mean, he was up there, and now we're at a point where it's like, oh, he's probably at the highest point in his career. I'm very excited for this movie. There's going to be other familiar faces in it. I believe Halle Berry's in it. I've already seen a couple pictures of him riding a horse in New York City, fighting people. That's going to be awesome. I've seen pictures of him in the desert with dogs. That's going to be awesome. There's a picture of him and Angelica Hudson. Apparently, NBA player, who is it? Is it Boban? Yeah, it's Boban, the 7'3" dude on the Pistons, Clippers, one of those two teams now. He's supposed to be in the movie at some point, and it's just like, I think people are really seeing how good they are at sticking to the action script, and I think we're going to see more action stars, and actually just more celebrities in general want to be a part of this, because it looks like it's a lot of fun to make, and it looks like it's a lot of fun to be a part of, especially once you see people's reactions afterwards, because people love these movies. I'll tell you what, I love these movies, and I'm super excited for this one because there's such large consequences from the end of the second one that I want to see where they go with it, and I want to see how they can continue to build on this character, kind of give us a little bit more of his past, but also build upon him re-emerging as the true boogeyman, re-emerging as this true cold-blooded machine-like killer. So I'm very excited to see where they're going to go with this franchise in John Wick 3. The thing that I am the second most excited for in 2019 is Avengers Endgame. Now, for a lot of people, this is going to be number one because it's kind of the closure of the first wave of Marvel movies. I understand that we've had 3 or 4 phases so far in Marvel movies, but this is definitely going to be a wrapping up point for multiple characters in it, and it's going to kind of force our hand into accepting that there's going to be a new wave of Avengers. I mean, we kind of felt that way when we got the Doctor Strange and the Black Panther and the new Spider-Man and everything, and now with Captain Marvel coming, we kind of felt that there was going to be a transition point, and I don't think that any of us were ready for it yet. And I think Infinity War definitely showed that they weren't ready for how the story goes, and that these characters were not prepared, and we weren't prepared to lose characters that we lost, and we're not going to be prepared to lose the characters forever that we're going to in Endgame. It definitely seems like, they're not going to come out of this without any major loss, and I think that's why so many people anticipate it, because they're like, who are we losing? They did such a good job at setting up an Infinity War. There was great chemistry between characters who had never interacted before. They kept your attention for the whole 2.5 hours, which is really difficult with superhero movies. And I think that they built upon, not necessarily the dissatisfaction, but the shock and awe from the end of it. I mean, there had never been a superhero movie where they lose. They honestly lost. And so I think that they left on such a good cliffhanger that so many people are going to go see this movie in theaters. And it's drastic to say, and I've heard a couple people say it already, and it's like, okay, Infinity War made $2 billion worldwide. Yeah, but Endgame is probably going to top it. And that's incredible. You're talking about 2 installations in the same franchise that make over $2 billion? 2 installations in the same franchise that are in the top 5 movies gross domestic worldwide, of all time? Like, that's going to be insane to think about. The movie, of course, has massive implications. Like I said, we're going to see a new wave of Avengers superheroes. It's going to give Marvel the opportunity to continue to expand and bring new characters to life. And I'm just really excited to see where this goes. I think it's going to be a passing of the torch moment. I think it's going to be, even if it is 3 hours, which if it is, I'm going to sit there and watch all of it, but it's going to be incredibly difficult. I think that they need to rethink that idea, but I think it's going to be a major instance of passing the torch, and we're really going to see, in my mind, I think we're going to see a focus shift from, Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, probably to a Captain Marvel, a Doctor Strange, and a Black Panther, or maybe even Spider-Man being one of the leaders in the group. I don't know, but I think it's going to be, we're going to kind of get to a point where it's going to be a new big three sort of in that group. So I'm very excited to see where this goes. I'm very excited to see what kind of record it's going to break and where it's going to take us in the future. Before I get to my most anticipated and thing that I'm most excited for in 2019, I want to talk about my honorable mentions. I have a bunch of them, just things that I didn't think of at the time and then thought of afterwards, and they still kind of sit outside my list. Very excited for Captain Marvel in March. I think Brie Larson's going to do an incredible job. I think that they're going to do a really good job of bringing more of the cosmic aspect of Marvel into it that they've already started with Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think that she's going to, of course, play a huge part in Endgame, and that it's going to be awesome. In 2019, we are going to get 2 long-awaited TV shows that were on hiatus. We're going to get Stranger Things Season 3 on July 4th, which I think is going to be awesome that they're not focused on Halloween, and that we're going to get a little bit more of Eleven being a normal part of society. And we also get the final season of Game of Thrones, which I'm super excited for. This was very, very, very narrowly knocked out of my list. I love Game of Thrones. I think there's a lot of people that do. This is definitely going to be like the most watched TV thing of all time. I am kind of upset that it is only 4 episodes. I get that all 4 episodes are going to be roughly an hour and a half, so it's basically going to be 4 movies. But I'll be interested to see how they wrap this entire story up in 6 hours of screen time. Another thing, I'm excited for Glass. I think Glass is going to be kind of at an awkward point that they're coming out with the movie in January. I think that it's been maybe a little too long since Split. Definitely way too long since Unbreakable. I think this movie kind of puts itself in a difficult situation, but I think it's going to be good. I am genuinely excited for it. I'm going to love the performance by Samuel L. Jackson. And I want to see how the dynamic of Split, of James McAvoy's character, is going to fit into it. And I want to see if they can go somewhere other than this one movie with it. Maybe kind of push it a little further. I don't know. Disney's lineup for 2019 is going to be absolutely incredible. They have their CG Dumbo. They have their live-action Aladdin. They have their CG Lion King. They have Toy Story 4. On top of course, owning the rights to Marvel and them having all those movies. But, I mean, I get that there are people that are upset that they're remaking all these movies, but I'm one that's actually kind of excited for them. To see them in a different light with a different director, different voice cast, maybe some different music. I am excited for those. Another thing that I'm excited for that a lot of people don't know about is the solo Joker movie that's done by Joaquin Phoenix. I'm starting to feel it. The more pictures and videos that come out from his sets, I'm kind of starting to think maybe this one's going to feel a little different than anything else. I think this one's going to be a lot rougher. I think this one's going to be a lot more serious, a lot more successfully toned about just how insane and how the just absolute craziness the Joker actually is. I mean, I think this is going to be a little bit closer to how the Joker should feel in movies than it has in the past. So I'm very excited for that. So to get to my number one thing that I am most excited for in 2019, and that is the continuing upward trajectory of horror movies. 2017 and 2018 were a great year for horror movies. 2 great years. We had Get Out, we had It, we had Hereditary, we've had the second Annabelle, we have The Conjuring still continuing to wow people even though it's been out for a little while. Netflix has really kind of pushed its boundaries with it, and I think it's definitely it's here. It's finally back in a major way, and it's been long enough, and I think it's gonna keep going this way. I mean, this year alone, we get a Pet Sematary remake. We get the second half of It. We get the movie Us from Jordan Peele. We get another Annabelle movie. We get a Crooked Man movie. I mean, and there's a bunch of others that I'm not mentioning directly. But all of these have good hype around it, have good cast, have good production, and barring a last second disappointment or, when it finally comes out not looking as good as we thought it would, all of these are still going to make good money, and they're still going to add to the fact that horror is coming back. It's going to be prevalent in the industry again. It's going to be prevalent in Hollywood again. People are going to want to make scary movies again. People are going to want to push the boundaries of what your mind can take, not necessarily focusing on gore. I think that's another important aspect of it too, is that a lot of these movies have been successful over the past 2 years without having to be torture porn, without having to be body horror. They've done a good job at focusing on actual fear and, horror in the movie rather than just a bunch of blood and guts and nudity. So I'm very excited to see where these movies take us. I'm very excited to see how we'll feel at the end of the year about a lot of these, and about what 2020 will bring us as well when we keep going with just this up and up attitude. I mean, we're going to get to a point here pretty soon where definitive horror movies that are scaring people are going to get, I dare say, Oscar nods. They're going to be good enough where people are going to say this is a really damn good movie and it deserves to be up there. So I'm very excited to see where horror takes us. There's a lot of things about 2019 that now that I pay closer attention to how Hollywood works, I'm very excited for. And I'm even more excited to go down this road with you guys, everybody who listens. I'd love if you guys stayed with me all year. We got a bunch of stuff that's going to be great content. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. We got plenty of movies, plenty of TV, plenty of everything coming out. So I'm very glad to be back for this new year. I'm very glad that you guys are still here listening. And I'm super excited about what this year's going to bring us. Thanks for listening.